The first time I noticed Damien's intense staring, I was too busy trying to balance a leaking bag of frozen peas, a carton of eggs, and my shifting work satchel while navigating the crowded grocery store aisle. "Luna, honey, please stay by the cart," I breathed, pushing a stray strand of dark hair out of my eyes. I felt like a mess. My scent, usually a warm, earthy cedar with hints of cinnamon, was probably spiked with the sour tang of stress and exhaustion. I'd been running on 3 hours of sleep, my heat suppressants were wearing thin, and my 5-year-old daughter had decided today was the day she would find me a mate whether I liked it or not. Luna didn't move. She stood in the middle of the cereal aisle, her tiny arms crossed over her dinosaur print t-shirt, her brow furrowed in a way that looked suspiciously like a miniature scowl. She wasn't looking at the Fruit Loops. She was evaluating a tall man in a business suit 2 feet away. "Luna," I prompted, reaching for her hand. Luna ignored me. She stepped forward, her little sneakers squeaking on the linoleum, and tapped the tall man on the knee. The man looked down, startled. "Hey there, kid. You lost." Luna tilted her head back, looking the alpha up and down with the critical eye of a diamond appraiser. "Can you carry 10 bags?" Luna asked, her voice high but incredibly serious. "What?" "My daddy's arms get tired," Luna explained, gesturing vaguely toward me. "And he cries when the eggs break." "Are you strong? Do you have a big car?" My face went from pale to bright crimson in a heartbeat. "Luna, oh my God. I am so sorry." I lunged forward, grabbing her by the shoulders and pulling her back. She's in a phase. She thinks she's in charge of human resources." The man laughed awkwardly and hurried away, clearly terrified of a 5-year-old's marriage proposal. "Luna," I hissed, kneeling so I was at her eye level. "We talked about this. You can't just ask strangers if they have big cars." "But Daddy," she said, her lower lip trembling just a tiny bit, the only sign that she wasn't actually a grown-up yet. "You're tired. Your shoulders go crunch when you sit down. You need a big alpha to help." I softened, tucking a lock of her dark hair behind her ear. She looked so much like her father, a man I'd walked away from before Luna was even a heartbeat in my womb, that it sometimes physically pained me to look at her. "You're my strong alpha, remember?" Luna huffed, a sound that was far too mature for someone who still needed help wiping her face. "I'm too small to reach the top shelf," she checked, holding up 5 fingers. "I'm only this many." I sighed, kissing her forehead. "Let's just get the milk and go home, okay?" We finished our shopping, but I could tell Luna wasn't finished with her mission. Her little head was on a swivel, her eyes darting from alpha to alpha as we stood in the checkout line. She was looking for something specific. Something she hadn't found yet. As we walked out into the parking lot, the wind picked up, carrying the scent of the city, exhaust, rain, and the distant smell of expensive cologne from the high-rise offices across the street. Luna stopped suddenly, her nose wrinkling. Her alpha instincts, though underdeveloped, were clearly picking up on something. "Daddy," she whispered, her voice suddenly very quiet. "What is it, Luna?" "That one." She pointed. Parked near the exit was a sleek, jet-black motorcycle. Leaning against it was a man. He was dressed in a leather jacket, his helmet tucked under his arm. He was massive, broad-shouldered, with dark, windswept hair and an aura of absolute, terrifying stillness. He wasn't just an alpha, he was a power alpha, the kind that made other people move out of their way without saying a word. And his scent, even from 20 feet away, hit me like a wall. Smoke and whiskey, dark and rich, with something underneath that was pure, undiluted alpha. It was the scent of danger and control, of a man who had never been told no in his life. Luna didn't hesitate. Before I could drop the groceries to catch her, my 5-year-old daughter was sprinting across the asphalt. "Luna, no! Stop!" But Luna was already there. She skidded to a halt in front of the giant man on the motorcycle. She didn't look scared. She looked like she had finally found exactly what she was looking for. "You!" Luna shouted, pointing a tiny finger at the man's chest. "You're the biggest. Do you like pancakes? My daddy makes the best ones. But he's lonely." The man turned. His sharp, dark eyes, the color of aged whiskey, landed on my daughter. For a second, the world seemed to stop. And then the man looked up and saw me. The alpha on the motorcycle didn't move. He didn't even blink. He just stared down at the tiny human who had just demanded to know his stance on breakfast foods. I finally reached them, gasping for air, my grocery bag swinging wildly against my legs. I felt like the world's most incompetent parent. "Luna, come here right now." I grabbed her hand, trying to pull her back, but the kid was like an anchor. She planted her feet, staring up at the giant alpha with a stubbornness that could move mountains. "He didn't answer yet," Luna said, her tone clipped and professional. "Are you a power alpha? You smell like a mountain on fire." I felt my face heat up so fast I thought I might actually combust. I turned to the man, my eyes wide with apology. "I am so sorry. She's very observant and she has no filter. Please just ignore her." The man finally moved. He straightened up from his bike, and I realized he was even taller than I'd first thought. His presence was like a physical weight, cool and steady, cutting through the humid afternoon air. Up close, his scent was overwhelming, smoke and aged whiskey, layered with something sharp and clean, like winter air. Underneath it all was a rich, warm undertone, amber and sandalwood, the unmistakable signature of a dominant alpha who had no need to prove his power because it was simply a fact of his existence. He looked at me, his dark eyes tracing the exhaustion in my face, the messy bun falling apart on top of my head, and the way I was desperately clutching a child who was clearly trying to sell me off to the highest bidder. Then he looked back down at Luna. "I think I like pancakes," the man said. His voice was a deep, gravelly rumble that seemed to vibrate in the pavement beneath my feet. It was the kind of voice that commanded boardrooms and battlefields, the kind that made people straighten their spines without thinking. Luna's eyes lit up like Christmas trees. She looked back at me with a triumphant "I told you so" expression. "See? He's the one." "He is not the one, Luna," I hissed, my voice an octave higher than usual. I looked back at the stranger, clutching my bags tighter. "Thank you for being a sport. We'll just be going now." "Wait." I froze. My internal omega instincts, the ones I usually kept buried under layers of single-parent grit, shivered. It wasn't a command, not exactly, but it had the gravity of one. The alpha reached out, but not for me. He reached for the heavy grocery bag that was currently cutting off the circulation in my right hand. Before I could protest, he had plucked it from my grip as if it weighed nothing at all. "The kid said your arms get tired," the alpha murmured, his gaze locking onto mine. There was a faint, almost invisible quirk at the corner of his mouth. "She wasn't lying. You're shaking." "I'm fine," I lied, even as my empty hand instinctively rubbed my sore shoulder. "I'm a parent. I'm legally required to be perpetually tired." "Where's your car?" he asked, ignoring my protest. I don't have one. We take the bus. The stop is just a block away." The alpha's brow furrowed. He looked at the heavy bags, then at Luna, then at the darkening clouds overhead. Without a word, he tucked his helmet onto the seat of his bike and took the rest of the bags from my other hand. "I'm Damien," he said. And the bus isn't coming for another 20 minutes. There's a storm rolling in. I'm Ethan, I stammered, feeling completely overwhelmed by his sudden helpfulness. And you don't have to do this, Mr. Damien. We're strangers, and my daughter just harassed you. I've been harassed by worse people for less important things, Damien replied. He looked at Luna. Lead the way, kid. Luna beamed, marching ahead like a little general. This way. Watch out for the big puddle, it's deep. I walked behind them, watching the impossible sight of a lethal-looking alpha carrying my groceries while my 5-year-old explained the complex lore of her favorite cartoon. I didn't know who this Damien was. I didn't know why a man with a motorcycle and $1,000 jacket was helping a struggling Omega. But as Luna looked back at me and winked, I realized I was in a lot of trouble. My daughter hadn't just found a helper. She had found a target. And the worst part? The scent of smoke and whiskey was already settling into my lungs like it belonged there. The bus stop was a depressing slab of concrete, but Luna made it feel like a throne room. She climbed onto the metal bench, swinging her legs while Damien stood beside her, still holding my groceries like they were made of gold rather than discounted pasta and toilet paper. So, Luna started, her voice dripping with authority. Do you have a big house with a yard for running? Luna, stop, I groaned, leaning against the glass partition of the shelter. Mr. Damien is a busy man. He doesn't need to give you a house tour. Damien didn't look annoyed. If anything, he looked more relaxed than he had in the parking lot. He carefully set the bags down on the bench and crouched slightly, so he was at eye level with my daughter. I have a yard, he said. Mostly trees. Good for climbing. Luna's jaw dropped. Trees? Like for ninjas? Exactly. For ninjas. I watched them, a strange warmth blooming in my chest. Luna had spent her whole life watching other kids at the park with their alpha fathers, men who tossed them into the air or carried them on their shoulders. I did my best, but I couldn't be everything. I couldn't be the mountain Luna so clearly craved. The first heavy drop of rain hit the pavement. Then another. Within seconds, the sky opened up, a sudden summer downpour that turned the street into a river. Great, I muttered, glancing down the empty road. The bus was nowhere in sight. Just what we needed. I reached for the bags, ready to huddle deeper into the shelter, but Damien was already moving. He pulled out his phone, made a quick call that lasted less than a minute, then looked at me. My driver is 2 minutes away, he said calmly. Your driver? I blinked. I thought you had a motorcycle. The bike is for when I want to be alone, Damien replied, his gaze settling on me, steady, focused, and utterly unnerving. My pulse jumped. A rainy day isn't for motorcycles. Not when there's an Omega and a ninja involved. We can't take your car, I said quickly. We're already a burden. You're not a burden. A sleek black SUV pulled up to the curb, looking like it didn't belong in our neighborhood at all. The driver jumped out with a massive umbrella, but Damien waved him off and took it himself, holding it over Luna and me as he guided us toward the car. Get in, Damien said. It wasn't harsh. It was the kind of command that made you feel safe just by hearing it. Luna scrambled into the back seat, gasping at the screens mounted behind the front seats. Whoa, Daddy, look! It's a spaceship. I slid in beside her, painfully aware of my damp clothes against the pristine leather. Damien climbed into the front, and the car instantly filled with his scent, smoke, whiskey, and something steady and grounding. Underneath it all, that amber and sandalwood wrapped around me like a warm blanket, and I had to resist the urge to lean into it. My own scent, cedar and cinnamon, rose involuntarily in response, and I caught the faintest shift in Damien's posture, the almost imperceptible way his jaw tightened. "Address?" Damien asked, meeting my eyes in the rearview mirror. I gave it to him, cringing. My neighborhood wasn't dangerous, but it was worlds away from black SUVs and personal drivers. It was a place for people who worked too hard and still worried about rent. The ride was quiet in a comfortable way. Luna was too busy pressing buttons to talk, leaving me catching Damien's gaze in the mirror every now and then. "So, Damien," I said as we turned onto my street. "About those pancakes." Damien's lips twitched. "You don't have to do that. You've already helped us enough." "I don't make promises I don't intend to keep," Damien replied. For a moment, he didn't sound like a helpful stranger. He sounded like a man who took responsibility seriously, the kind of man who, when he gave his word, meant it with every fiber of his being. "And I'm hungry." Luna sat up straight, eyes shining. "Tomorrow is Saturday. Saturday is Pancake Day." The SUV stopped in front of my aging apartment building. Damien took in the flickering porch light, the cracked steps, then looked back at me. "I'll be here at 9, he said. "Does that work?" I looked at Luna, who was vibrating with excitement. Then I looked at Damien, whose calm certainty made saying no feel impossible. 9 is fine, I said quietly. "Good." He leaned over the seat, handing me the groceries. His fingers brushed mine, and the contact sent a shock of warmth through my entire body. My sense spiked, cedar sharpening with something sweeter, something I couldn't control. Damien's eyes darkened, just for a fraction of a second, before he pulled back. "See you tomorrow, ninja." Luna snapped into a sharp salute. "See you tomorrow, Damien." I stood under the narrow awning and watched the black SUV disappear into the rain. "Daddy?" Luna tugged on my hand. "Yes. I told you he was the biggest," she said proudly. "He's going to be a great alpha for us." I looked down at my daughter, the tiny matchmaker who had turned our entire life upside down. "Let's get upstairs," I said softly. "We have a lot of cleaning to do." I spent the entire night cleaning. I scrubbed the kitchen floor until my back ached and dusted shelves that hadn't seen a cloth in months. Every time I looked at our mismatched chairs or the faded rug, a tight knot of anxiety settled in my chest. Why was I doing this? He was just a stranger who liked pancakes. But that wasn't entirely true. He was the first person in a long time who had made me feel like I didn't have to carry the weight of the world on my own. Even if it had only been for a 10-minute car ride. And that scent. Smoke and whiskey, dark and dangerous, it had burrowed into my senses and refused to leave. Every time I closed my eyes, I could smell him. Every time I breathed too deeply, I could feel the echo of his presence, the phantom weight of his gaze on my skin. This was dangerous. This was exactly the kind of distraction I couldn't afford. But at exactly 9 o'clock the next morning, the buzzer rang. Luna, already dressed in her favorite superhero pajamas and a mismatched pair of socks, let out a battle cry. "He's here. The big alpha is here. Luna, don't run." I called, wiping flour-dusted hands on my apron. When I opened the door, the narrow hallway somehow felt even smaller. Damien stood there, leaning casually against the door frame. He'd traded the leather jacket for a plain black Henley that clung to his broad shoulders in a way that should have been illegal. In one hand, he held a small white box. In the other, a single perfect yellow tulip. "Morning," he rumbled. His scent, smoke, whiskey, amber, filled my apartment instantly, crowding out the familiar smells of home and replacing them with something far more intoxicating. "Hi," I breathed, suddenly aware of my messy hair and worn apron. You're early." "I was hungry," he said, a faint smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. He held out the flower for me, and the box for the ninja. Luna was already circling his legs like a shark. Is it donuts? Is it a toy? Damien crouched down until he was at eye level with my daughter. It's a high-protein breakfast bar disguised as a chocolate muffin. Don't tell your daddy. Luna's eyes went wide. I'm a ninja. I'm good at secrets. I laughed despite myself, the tension in my shoulders finally easing. Come in. The coffee's on, and the batter's resting. As Damien stepped inside, he didn't look at the cracked ceiling or the aging furniture with judgment. He noticed Luna's drawings taped crookedly to the fridge, the neatly folded blankets on the couch. He looked at our home like it was something worth seeing. You have a nice place, he said quietly. It smells like you. It's calm. It's usually chaotic, I admitted, turning back to the stove. But Luna insisted on her best behavior today. The next hour felt unreal. Damien sat at the small table, his large frame making the chair look like a toy, while Luna sat beside him, laying out every plastic dinosaur she owned. Damien listened to the detailed history of the T-Rex with complete seriousness. He didn't talk down to Luna, he spoke to her like an equal. So, Damien, Luna said around a mouthful of pancake. Are you going to stay? I nearly dropped the spatula. Luna. Manners. Damien didn't flinch. He sipped his coffee slowly, his dark eyes flicking to me before returning to my daughter. That depends, he said. Is there a job opening? Yes. Luna shouted. The carry-everything job and the open-the-jar job. Daddy's hands are too small for the pickles. Damien chuckled, low and warm. The sound filled the kitchen. His gaze met mine, steady, intense, and utterly disarming. I think I can handle the pickles, he said. If your daddy lets me. Heat crept up my neck. The pickles are manageable. But the air shifted. This wasn't just about pancakes anymore. There was a pull between us, old, instinctive, undeniable. I was an Omega who had learned to survive by staying small, and Damien was a power alpha who seemed determined to see me anyway. His scent had intensified, the smoke and whiskey thickening with something else, desire, controlled but unmistakable. My own scent responded, the cedar and cinnamon rising to meet his, intertwining in a way that made my knees weak. Then the knock came. It was loud, heavy, aggressive. My heart dropped. Ethan, I know you're in there, a voice barked from the hall. We need to talk about the late fees. And the noise complaints. Mr. Henderson. I stiffened, my hand trembling as I set the spatula down. I should see what he wants. I took a step toward the door, but a large, warm hand caught my wrist. Damien was standing now. He didn't look like the easygoing alpha from the kitchen. He looked like the man from the parking lot, solid, dangerous, immovable. His eyes had gone cold, and the power radiating off him made the air in the room feel heavy. Stay here, he said quietly. Finish the pancakes. No, he's mean, he won't be, Damien interrupted, his eyes darkening. He looked at Luna. Ninja. Watch your daddy. I'll be right back. Luna climbed onto her chair and saluted sharply. Yes, sir. I watched as Damien opened the door. The landlord started to shout, but the sound died instantly. I couldn't hear what Damien said, I didn't need to. I saw Mr. Henderson's face drain of color, saw him stumble back, nod frantically, and retreat down the hall like he'd seen a ghost. Damien closed the door and turned back to us, perfectly calm. Now, he said. Where were we? I think the Triceratops was about to fight the raptor. I stood there, stunned. For 5 years, I had fought that man alone. And Damien had ended it in 5 seconds. Luna leaned close to me and whispered loudly, "I told you, Daddy. He's the biggest." The rest of the morning passed in a haze. After the landlord's abrupt disappearance, the apartment felt lighter, as if something heavy had been lifted from the walls themselves. Damien finished his pancakes, listened patiently to 3 more dinosaur stories, and even helped Luna hunt for a missing Lego under the sofa. But as I washed the last plate, reality began to creep back in. Men like Damien didn't simply wander into the lives of struggling omegas and stay put. I put the towel down. "We're going out." I looked up. Damien was leaning against the counter, watching me with that same unsettling focus. "Out?" I blinked. "I still have laundry, and Luna has a nap. I'm a ninja," Luna declared loudly. "Ninjas don't nap." "The laundry can wait," Damien said calmly, taking the towel from my hands and setting it aside. "It's a beautiful day. And the ninja tells me she's never been to the city aquarium." Luna froze. "The one with the sharks?" "The big sharks," she gasped. "The biggest?" "The biggest," Damien promised. I hesitated. "That place is expensive. I can't let you." "Ethan." He stepped closer until my back brushed the counter. He didn't touch me, but his presence wrapped around me completely. Hearing my name in his voice, low, steady, almost gentle, made my knees weaken. His scent surrounded me, warm and rich, and my omega instincts purred in response. "Stop trying to pay for everything with your pride," he said quietly. "Let me do this for her." I met his eyes and knew I didn't have the strength to refuse. The cedar in my scent softened, submission and acceptance bleeding through despite my best efforts to maintain control. Damien's nostrils flared slightly, and I saw the brief, possessive flicker in his gaze before he smoothed it away. "Okay," I whispered. "Just let me change." The city aquarium felt unreal. Glass walls rose around us, filled with deep blue light and creatures that looked like they belonged to another world. Luna was pressed against the shark tank, vibrating with excitement, while Damien and I lingered a few steps behind. "You're very good with her," I said softly. "Most alphas don't have the patience." Damien watched Luna carefully. "I didn't grow up with much patience," he admitted. "My father was a strong alpha. He thought kindness was weakness." "I'm sorry." He shrugged. "It taught me what not to be." He hesitated, then asked quietly, "Did you raise her alone?" The question caught me off guard. "It wasn't always my choice," I said after a moment. "Her father didn't want a biological mistake. He wanted his career." Damien stopped walking. "He said that?" His voice dropped, dangerous and controlled. The air around him seemed to chill, and his scent sharpened with barely suppressed rage. "He only saw the Omega label," I murmured. Damien lifted my chin gently, forcing me to meet his eyes. The touch sent a spark through me, heat and electricity that made my breath catch. His scent wrapped around me, protective and possessive, and I felt my own Omega instincts preen under the attention. "Then he's a fool," Damien said. "Because I see you, and I know exactly what you're worth." Before I could reply, movement rippled through the crowd. Security guards approached, clearing a path. "Mr. Russo," one of them said urgently. "We didn't know you were visiting. We would have closed the gallery." I froze. Damien exhaled sharply. "I'm here as a guest," he said coldly. "Leave us alone." They retreated immediately, but the whispers had already started. I turned to him, heart racing. "Damien. Who are you?" He looked toward Luna, who was waving excitedly at a shark. My name is Damien Russo, he said quietly. My family owns the shipping yards, the tech labs, and this aquarium. I'm the CEO of Russo International. The world tilted. I stepped back. I was an Omega who counted pennies. He was power incarnate, and not just any power. The Russos were legend. They were the kind of family that didn't just have money, they had influence that stretched across continents, fingers in every pie, a network of connections that made governments nervous. And Damien wasn't just a Russo. He was the heir. The one who would inherit it all. I was a single father who worked at a bookstore. I lived in a cramped apartment with a 5-year-old and a fridge that sometimes went empty between paychecks. What are you doing here? I whispered, my voice shaking. With us? This is a joke to you, isn't it? A little game to pass the time. Damien moved closer, careful not to crowd me. His fingers brushed my hand, and the contact sent a jolt of warmth through me that I desperately wanted to resist. Please don't run, he said softly. I'm still the man who likes your pancakes. I'm just someone who can make sure you and Luna never have to be afraid again. I couldn't speak. My body trembled, caught between fear and a longing I didn't want to acknowledge. Daddy! Luna shouted suddenly. The big one is coming. I looked at my daughter, the tiny matchmaker who had no idea how much she'd just changed our lives. The beautiful blue light of the aquarium didn't feel magical anymore. It felt clinical, like we were specimens in one of Damien's own tanks. The water beyond the glass wasn't serene, it was a barrier, thin and fragile, separating us from things that could swallow us whole. The whispers of the crowd, is that Damien Russo? It's him, buzzed against my skin like static. I didn't run. My feet were rooted to the spot, my arms locked around Luna, who was still chattering excitedly about the shark's teeth. My smile felt plastered on, a parent's autopilot function engaging despite the internal sirens. Russo International. The shipping yards. The tech labs. The words were too big. They didn't fit in my cramped apartment, in my budget spreadsheet, in my life. The man who had patiently listened to dinosaur lore and helped hunt for Legos didn't just have a nice motorcycle. He had a fleet. He hadn't just helped with groceries, he'd probably never carried a grocery bag in his life before today. Was this all a fascinating diversion for him? A charity project? Had my daughter's adorable audacity been nothing more than a novelty for a bored billionaire? I looked at him. Damien. And the man I'd started to tentatively trust was gone, replaced by a statue of power in a simple Henley. The gentle, rumbling voice that had spoken to Luna as an equal now felt like a carefully deployed tool. Daddy, look! Damien got me bitey. Luna shoved a plush shark into my line of sight, its beady eyes staring blankly. He's great, baby, I managed, my voice thin. Damien's eyes were on me, watching the shutters fall behind my own. I saw his jaw tighten, the only sign that he'd noticed the cataclysm happening inside me. He took a single deliberate step closer, his body angling to shield us from the lingering stares of the staff. Let's get Luna somewhere quiet, he said, his voice a low rumble meant only for me. It wasn't a suggestion, it was a plea wrapped in a command. Then we talk. Please. He didn't touch me. He held out a hand for Luna, who took it instantly, swinging their joined hands. Are we going to see the jellyfish again? Luna asked, oblivious. Not today, ninja, Damien said, his eyes still locked on mine, ensuring I was following. We're going home. The ride in the black SUV was silent. The divider was up, granting a hollow privacy. Luna, high on sugar and excitement, chatted for 5 minutes about Bitey the shark's adventures before her words slurred, her eyelids drooped, and she slumped against my side, asleep. I stroked her hair, the familiar soft texture, my only anchor. Damien sat in the front passenger seat, not looking back. His reflection in the darkened window was a profile of stone. The space between us, filled with Luna's soft snores, was a canyon. When the SUV glided to a stop outside my building, the cracked concrete and flickering porch light seemed to scream their shabbiness, a glaring contrast to the vehicle idling at the curb. Damien got out and opened my door himself, dismissing the driver with a nod. I gathered Luna into my arms, her dead weight familiar and comforting. Damien moved as if to take her from me, but I shifted away, a small, defensive motion. His hand fell back to his side. We walked up the steps in silence. At my door, I fumbled for my keys, the sleeping child in my arms making me clumsy. Damien didn't offer to help. He just waited, a large, silent shadow. I got the door open and turned, blocking the entrance. Luna's head was heavy on my shoulder. "You should go," I said. The words came out quiet but final. He didn't flinch. "I know what you're thinking," he said, his voice so low it was almost lost in the city's hum. "That this was a game. Or pity." A bitter laugh caught in my throat. "How could it not be?" I whispered, afraid to wake Luna, afraid to break completely. "You live on a different planet, Damien. You have everything. You saw a broken thing and decided to fix it for the afternoon. It was a nice story. But we're not a story. We're real." He moved then, one step up, closing the distance so his eyes could bore into mine in the dim hallway light. The raw intensity there made me want to shrink back. "You think I don't have needs?" The question was a rasp, stripped of all its power, leaving only a startling vulnerability. "I spend my life in soundproofed boardrooms and empty penthouses. I have everything that means nothing." Then a 5-year-old general in a dinosaur shirt marches up to me and gives me a mission. Purpose. And her father. His gaze swept over my face, my tired eyes, my protective hold on my daughter. Her father looks at me like I'm a person. Not a bank account. Not a title. A person. For the first time in years, I felt needed. Not for my signature. For my hands, to carry groceries, to open jars, to be a mountain for a kid who deserves one. He looked down at Luna's sleeping face, his expression softening into something that looked like awe. "She didn't find a target, Ethan. She threw a lifeline to a man drowning in quiet. And I am not letting go." The air left my lungs. All my arguments, all my fears of being a charity case, shriveled in the face of his confession. The billionaire facade was gone. This was just Damien, the man who liked pancakes, the man whose own father thought kindness was weakness, the man who was himself lonely in a crowd of billions. I couldn't speak. My arms tightened around Luna. Damien saw my crumbling resolve. He didn't push. He took a single step back, giving me space. "I'll be here when you're ready," he said, his voice firm again but gentle. He reached out then, but not for me. With a touch so careful it was almost reverent, he adjusted the plush shark in Luna's slack grip, tucking it securely under my daughter's arm. A tender, paternal gesture that shattered the last of my defenses. I nodded, a tiny, broken motion, and slipped inside my apartment. The door clicked shut behind me, the sound deafening in the sudden silence. I leaned back against the wood, my heart pounding against Luna's back. The familiar scent of our home, laundry soap, old books, the faint ghost of this morning's pancakes, wrapped around me. I looked at my sleeping daughter, her lashes dark against her cheeks. I looked at our worn sofa, the crayon drawings on the fridge, the life I had built with sweat and sheer will. The fear wasn't that he was a billionaire. The terrifying, thrilling truth was that I was starting to believe him. A week passed. The silence from Damien was absolute, and it was louder than any knock on the door. No black SUV idled at the curb. No text messages buzzed my cheap phone. The single yellow tulip he'd brought, now drooping in a juice glass on the windowsill, was the only evidence he'd ever been here at all. Luna asked about him once. "When is Damien coming back for more pancakes?" I was scrubbing a stubborn stain on the counter, my shoulders tense. "I don't know, baby. He's a very busy man." "Oh." Luna's little face was thoughtful. She picked up Bitey the shark. "That's okay. Ninjas are patient." But I wasn't a ninja. I was an omega with a heart that felt like it had been cracked open, examined, and left on the shelf. His confession in the hallway had replayed in my mind 1,000 times, a lifeline to a man drowning in quiet. The words were a haunting, beautiful song I was too scared to believe was meant for me. My pride, that old familiar armor, whispered that he'd come to his senses, that the reality of my world, the landlord who, true to Damien's word, had become a silent ghost, the budget groceries, the constant grinding fatigue, had finally registered. The fantasy was over. And yet my instincts, the deep omega core of me that had calmed in his presence, hummed a different tune. It remembered the safety, the rightness of his hands carrying my burdens. The conflict made me restless. I cleaned things that were already clean. I reorganized Luna's toys 3 times. On Thursday, the doorbell rang. My heart leapt into my throat, a traitorous, hopeful thing. I smoothed my hair, took a breath, and opened the door. It wasn't Damien. A uniformed delivery man stood there, holding a large, flat rectangular box. "Delivery for Miss Luna Reyes." "That's my daughter." He handed me the heavy box and a tablet to sign. There was no return label, just a sleek, embossed logo of a tree. Puzzled, I carried it inside. "Luna, something for you." She came running, her eyes wide. We opened the box together, pulling back layers of crisp tissue paper. Inside was not a toy. It was a custom-made wooden growth chart, but not a plain one. It was a beautiful carved tree, its branches stretching up the 6-foot length. A delicate ruler was etched into the trunk, and on one of the lower branches, a small, perfectly carved dinosaur was perched, looking up. Taped to it was a simple, typewritten note on thick cream paper, "For the ninja, to mark your climb." D. No demands. No pressure. Just a quiet, tangible proof that he'd been listening, that he remembered the trees for ninjas, comment from the bus stop, that he was thinking of Luna's future. Luna traced the carved dinosaur with a reverent finger. He remembered the trees, she whispered, as if it were a sacred secret. I felt the first crack in my resolve. Then, on Friday, the second delivery came, a smaller box. This one was for me. My hands shook as I opened it. Nestled inside was a book, not new. A first edition of a classic fantasy novel I'd mentioned in passing at the aquarium, when we'd passed a poster for a movie adaptation. I'd sighed and said, I wore out my paperback copy of that in high school. This copy was old, the spine carefully restored, the pages gilt-edged. It smelled of vanilla and aged paper. The note inside the cover was in the same type, but the message was different, for Ethan. So you can visit other worlds when this one is too heavy. He hadn't sent jewels or clothes or anything that screamed of his wealth. He'd sent a piece of my own past, lovingly preserved. It sent a promise of escape, of understanding. He'd been listening to me too. I sank onto the sofa, the book held to my chest. This wasn't the pursuit of a powerful alpha claiming a prize. This was the careful, patient courtship of a man who saw the specifics of us. He wasn't trying to buy our affection. He was trying to speak our language. The fear didn't vanish. It was still there, a cold knot in my stomach. But it was now entwined with a fragile, blooming hope. That night, after I put Luna to bed, I stood in the quiet living room. The growth chart leaned against the wall, waiting to be mounted. The book sat on my nightstand. The tulip's last petals fell onto the windowsill. I'd spent so long being strong for two that I'd forgotten what it felt like to be seen as a person, not just a provider. Damien had seen me. He'd seen the tiredness, yes, but also the dreamer who loved stories. He'd seen Luna not as a burden but as a tiny warrior. My phone felt heavy in my hand. I pulled up a new message screen, my fingers hovering over the keys. The silence had been his way of giving me space. Now it was my turn to make a sound. I didn't type much, just 3 words. It was all I could manage. A bridge made of a single, trembling plank. The jars are stuck. I held my breath and pressed send. The response was almost instantaneous, as if he'd been waiting, phone in hand. It wasn't a text. It was a single image, a photo of a single pancake on a plate, slightly lopsided, with a dollop of butter melting in the center. No words. Just an answer. An invitation. A promise. I looked at the lopsided pancake and felt the first real smile in a week spread across my face. The quiet was over. The storm of our two worlds colliding was about to begin. And for the first time, I wasn't sure I wanted to hide from it. He arrived not in the black SUV but on the motorcycle. The rumble of the engine was a low, familiar growl that vibrated up through the floorboards of my apartment. I heard it from the kitchen window, my heart doing a strange, frantic tap dance against my ribs. I hadn't told him to come, I just sent the text. But somehow, I knew he would. Luna was already at the door, bouncing on her toes. He's here. He got the message. How do you know it's him? I asked, wiping my hands on a towel, trying to sound calm. The mountain is rumbling, Luna said, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. When I opened the door, the hallway was full of him. The scent of smoke and whiskey, even though the night was clear. He stood there, helmet under his arm, wearing a simple gray Henley that stretched across his chest. His gaze went straight to me, searching, cautious. Damien. Luna launched herself forward, wrapping her arms around Damien's denim-clad leg. You got the message. We have a really stubborn pickle jar. It's an emergency. A faint smile touched Damien's mouth, but his eyes stayed on mine. An emergency, huh? Code red, Luna confirmed, nodding solemnly. Well, then. Damien looked at me, a question in his eyes. May I come in for the emergency? I stepped back, wordlessly granting him entry. The air in the apartment shifted, charged and alive, as he crossed the threshold. He'd only been here once, but he moved through the space as if he knew it, his eyes taking in the growth chart now mounted by Luna's door, the old book on my side table. He followed Luna to the kitchen, where the offending jar sat on the counter. He picked it up, examined the lid, and with a single, effortless twist, opened it. The pop of the seal breaking was loud in the quiet kitchen. Wow, Luna breathed, her hero worship at an all-time high. You're the strongest. Damien set the open jar down. All in the technique, ninja. Then he turned to me. His playfulness faded, replaced by a deep, unsettling seriousness. Ethan. Can we talk? I nodded, my throat tight. Luna, why don't you go set the table for a snack? We'll have those pickles, okay? Luna grabbed the jar and scampered off, giving us a semblance of privacy in the tiny kitchen. Damien didn't move closer. He leaned against the counter, mirroring his position from that first morning, but his posture was less relaxed. He was holding himself in check. The gifts, they weren't meant to pressure you. I just needed you to know I was listening. That I'm still here. I know, I said softly, folding the towel over and over in my hands. They were perfect. Thank you. The silence was the hardest thing I've ever done, he admitted, the raw honesty back in his voice. I wanted to call. To show up. But you needed to choose. I needed you to know this isn't about what I can take. It's about what I hope you'll let me give. I looked up, meeting those dark eyes. The fear was still there, a cold whisper, but his words warmed me from the inside out. It's terrifying, I whispered. Your world. It's not just big cars and aquariums, Damien. It's a world that eats people like me for breakfast. People who count coupons and worry about rent. I don't know how to live in it. He pushed off the counter then, closing the distance between us in 2 strides. He didn't touch me, but his nearness was a physical heat. His scent wrapped around me, smoke and whiskey, amber and sandalwood, and my omega instinct sang in response. I could feel my own scent rising to meet his, cedar and cinnamon intertwining with his in a dance as old as time. You won't be living in my world, Ethan. Don't you see that? I want to live in yours. The one with pancake Saturdays and dinosaur battles. I want to build a new world with you, one where you never have to be afraid of a landlord or a broken jar again. Where Luna has every tree to climb. His words painted a picture so beautiful it hurt. It sounds like a fantasy. Then let me prove it's not. He finally reached out, his fingers gently brushing a stray strand of hair from my cheek. The touch was electric, and something else. A pulse of warmth, of recognition. His scent intensified, that amber and sandalwood wrapping around me like a physical embrace. My own scent responded, the cedar and cinnamon rising to meet his. The air between us thickened, charged with something primal and undeniable. Let me take you out, he said softly. Not to an aquarium I own. Somewhere neutral. Just you and me. Let me court you properly, Ethan. Not as Damien Russo, CEO. As Damien, the man who is utterly, completely captivated by you and your daughter. My resistance crumbled. The wall I'd built, brick by painful brick over 5 lonely years, dissolved under the warmth of his touch and the sincerity in his eyes. He wasn't asking for everything. He was asking for a chance. Okay, I breathed, the word feeling like a leap off a cliff. Okay. Just you and me. The relief that washed over his face was profound. It smoothed the tension from his brow, softened the hard line of his mouth. He looked younger. He looked hopeful. Saturday, he said, his thumb stroking my cheekbone once, softly, before he let his hand fall away. I'll pick you up at 7. Luna? He raised his voice slightly. I need your professional opinion as head of security. Luna appeared in the doorway, a pickle spear in hand. Yes, sir. I'm taking your daddy out on Saturday night. I need you to vet the babysitter. Can you handle that? Luna's chest puffed out. I will interrogate them thoroughly. Do they know ninja moves? That will be your first question, Damien said gravely. He looked back at me, and the smile he gave me then was not the smile of a billionaire or a power alpha. It was the bright, unguarded smile of a man who had just been given a precious gift. Until Saturday. He left as quietly as he came. The rumble of his motorcycle faded into the city's heartbeat. I stood in the kitchen, the ghost of his touch on my skin, the scent of him lingering in the air. My own scent was still elevated, tinged with something I hadn't felt in years, anticipation. Daddy? Luna asked, crunching her pickle. You're smiling. I was. For the first time in a very long time, the fear was no longer the loudest thing in the room. It was drowned out by the sound of my own hopeful heart, beating a frantic, joyous rhythm against my ribs. The storm wasn't coming to sweep us away. We were walking right into its eye, hand in hand. The babysitter, a gentle beta man named Marcus who thankfully knew 3 whole ninja moves, arrived at 6:45. Luna gave him a stern, pickle-scented briefing on the rules of the fortress before finally granting him provisional approval with a solemn handshake. I was a nervous wreck. I tried on 4 different outfits, settling finally on a simple dark green button-down and my 1 pair of trousers without a worn knee. My usual cedar and cinnamon scent was spiked with a new, sharp note, fear, and something else. Anticipation. When the knock came, it wasn't loud. It was firm. Certain. I took a deep breath, squeezed Luna's shoulder, and opened the door. Damien stood there. My breath caught. He wasn't in leather or a t-shirt. He wore a dark jacket over a charcoal sweater, tailored trousers. He looked breathtakingly handsome. But it was the look in his eyes that undid me. They weren't the eyes of a CEO surveying an asset. They were warm, intent, fixed only on me, filled with an appreciation that made heat bloom under my skin. "Hi," he said softly. "Hi," I breathed back. He offered his arm, not his hand, his arm. A gesture both old-fashioned and deeply alpha. I slipped my hand into the crook of his elbow, feeling the solid muscle beneath the fine wool, and let him guide me down the stairs. The black SUV was waiting, but this time there was no driver. Damien held the passenger door open for me before walking around to the driver's side. "I thought you had a driver," I said as he pulled smoothly into the evening traffic. "I do," he said. "But tonight, it's just me." He didn't take me to a glittering, impossible restaurant in the financial district. Instead, he drove us to a quieter, charming part of the city, to a small, family-owned Italian place tucked down a cobblestone lane. It was warm, intimate, and smelled of garlic and fresh bread. It was normal. Wonderful. The owner greeted Damien by name, not with fawning deference, but with genuine warmth. "Damien. Your usual table in the back is ready. And you brought a friend. Bellissimo." He'd been here before. Often. This was his place, not his empire's. Over plates of incredible pasta and a glass of wine that tasted like sunshine, he asked me questions. Real ones. Not about my struggles, but about my dreams. What did I love to read? What was the funniest thing Luna had ever done? What did I want to do someday, when I had the time and the breath to think about myself? He talked too, not about mergers or stock prices, but about his love for his motorcycle, the freedom of the open road. He told a funny, self-deprecating story about trying to cook for himself for the first time and nearly burning down his penthouse kitchen. He spoke of his father, a fierce omega who had quietly defied his alpha husband's harshness and planted the seed of a different kind of strength in him. For 2 hours, I forgot he was Damien Russo. He was just Damien, and I was just Ethan, and it was the easiest, most natural conversation of my life. "This is perfect," I sighed, sipping my wine, feeling a warmth that had nothing to do with the alcohol. His smile was tender. "It is." Then, as the waiter cleared our plates, Damien's phone buzzed on the table. He glanced at it, and his expression shut down. The easy warmth vanished, replaced by a cold, grim mask. It was the face he'd worn when dealing with the landlord. The CEO's face. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice tight. "I have to take this. It's my father." "Of course," I said. The warm bubble of the evening popped. He stood and walked toward the front of the restaurant, his posture rigid. I watched him through the front window. He wasn't talking, he was listening, his face like granite. After a minute, he hung up and stood perfectly still on the sidewalk, his back to me, head bowed. When he came back to the table, the mask was back in place, but it was brittle. "Ethan, I'm so sorry. Something urgent has come up. I need to go." Disappointment, sharp and sudden, pierced me. But it was the look in his eyes, a flicker of something like anguish, that concerned me more. "Is everything okay?" "It's a business matter," he said, the lie smooth and hollow. He wouldn't meet my eyes. He threw a stack of bills on the table, far too much, and stood. "My driver will take you home. He's just outside." "Damien, wait." But he was already striding for the door. I scrambled after him, confusion and hurt churning in my gut. The warm, perfect night had shattered. A different SUV, a black one with tinted windows, was idling at the curb. A driver held the door open. Damien stopped before getting into the passenger seat. He turned to me, and for a second, the mask slipped. I saw the conflict, the frustration, the pain. "I'll explain," he said, the words rushed. "Please, just let the driver take you home. Be safe." Then he was inside, and the car pulled away, disappearing into the night. I stood on the sidewalk, feeling foolish and cold in my nice shirt. The driver cleared his throat. "Sir?" Numbly, I got into the back of the luxurious car. It smelled of lemon polish and wealth. As we drove through the glittering city, away from the cozy restaurant, the truth settled over me like a frost. This was the reality. The urgent calls, the separate cars, the parts of his life I wasn't allowed into. The parts that could yank him away from me in an instant. He'd let me glimpse the man, but the empire had just reasserted its claim. And empires didn't share. The driver saw me to my door. Luna was asleep. Marcus reported a perfect evening. I paid him, thanked him, and then I was alone. I changed out of the clothes, the fabric that had felt so hopeful now feeling like a costume. I picked up the book he'd given me, running my fingers over the gilt edges. The gesture had felt so personal hours ago. Now it felt like another artifact from a world I couldn't touch. The phone on my nightstand lit up. A text from Damien. "I am so sorry. It was unavoidable. Can I see you tomorrow? I need to explain." The hope in his words was a tiny, fragile flame. But the memory of his shuttered face, the cold efficiency of his exit, was a bucket of ice water. I didn't know how to reply. The man who opened pickle jars and loved pancake Saturdays felt like a dream. The man who left in a black SUV felt like the cold, hard truth. I was falling for Damien. But I was terrified of Damien and Rousseau, and I didn't know if they could ever truly be the same person. I set the phone down without replying. The silence was my only answer. The gilded cage of his world hadn't swallowed me whole, it had just shown me its bars. And for the first time, I wondered if the man inside it was as trapped as I would be. The silence lasted until Saturday morning. I didn't reply to his text. He didn't send another. The unspoken space between us stretched thin and tense, filled with the memory of his abrupt exit and the cold ride home. The book on my nightstand seemed to watch me, a monument to a connection that might have already shattered. Luna padded into my room at dawn, Bitey the shark tucked under her arm. She climbed onto the bed and studied my face with the terrifying perception of a 5-year-old. "You're thinking about Damien," she stated. "Yeah," I admitted, my voice rough with sleeplessness. "Is he still your alpha?" The question was so simple, so profound. "I don't know, baby. I think he is," Luna said with absolute faith. "He just got lost, like in the supermarket. But we can find him." Before I could answer, a familiar low rumble echoed up from the street. Not the aggressive purr of a sports car or the silent glide of the SUV. It was the distinctive, grumbling idle of a motorcycle. My heart stuttered. Luna scrambled off the bed and ran to the window. He's here. And he has stuff. Curiosity pulled me to the window. Parked below was the black motorcycle, and Damien, in his leather jacket, was unloading it. Not with the efficient grace of a CEO, but with the slightly awkward determination of a man on a mission. He had 2 large reusable grocery bags in one hand and a small, awkwardly tied bouquet of wildflowers in the other. He wasn't in a suit. He wasn't sending a driver. He was just Damien. At 8 o'clock on a Saturday morning. Standing on my cracked sidewalk, looking up. He saw us in the window. He didn't wave. He just held up the flowers and the bags, a silent, vulnerable offering. He brought the stuff for Pancake Day, Luna whispered, as if it were a sacred ritual. The ice around my heart cracked. He wasn't hiding in his tower. He'd come back to our place. To pancakes. To us. Go let him in, ninja, I said softly. Luna shot out of the room like a rocket. I took a deep breath, ran a hand through my sleep-mussed hair, and followed. By the time I reached the living room, Damien was inside. He'd set the groceries on the kitchen counter and was handing the wildflowers, dandelions, clover, and a few drooping daisies, clearly picked from some patch of city grass, to a beaming Luna. For the table, Damien said, his voice gravelly. He finally looked at me, and the exhaustion and regret in his eyes were a physical blow. I'm sorry. For leaving. For the way I left. There are no excuses good enough. Luna, sensing grown-up talk, wisely scampered to put the flowers in water. You said you'd explain, I said, leaning against the door frame, arms crossed. Not to push him away, to hold myself together. He nodded, shoving his hands in his jacket pockets. The call, it was my father. Not a business emergency. Personal. He had a minor heart episode. He was at a charity gala. It was chaos, press everywhere. My security team just extracted him. In that world, a Russo having a public health crisis isn't a family matter. It's a corporate one. It's a fire to put out. I had to go, Ethan. But the way I handled it, I panicked. I saw his face, and I switched back into that cold mode. The mode that deals with crises and keeps the vultures away. I treated you like a problem to be managed, not a person to be respected. I am so sorry. He looked around our kitchen, his gaze lingering on the growth chart, the fridge drawings. I got in the car, and all I could think was that I'd just become everything I hate. Everything I've been running from on that motorcycle. The man who walks away when things get messy. The man my father raised. He took a step closer. The scent of leather and night air and pure, aching sincerity filled the space between us. I drove all night. Just drove. Then I stopped, and I realized I didn't want to run from something. I want to run to something. To here. To this. He gestured to the grocery bags. I bought the mix and the syrup and the good butter. I don't know if it's enough. I don't know if I can ever fully separate the CEO from the man who loves you. That world will always have its claws in me. But I can promise you this, I will always fight my way back to this kitchen. I will always choose Pancake Saturday over the board meeting. I will spend the rest of my life proving that you and Luna are the only legacy I care about. Tears blurred my vision. He wasn't offering a perfect solution. He was offering a messy, real, dedicated choice. He was admitting his flaws, his divided self, and choosing us anyway. I uncrossed my arms. The good butter, huh? A faint, hopeful smile touched his lips. Only the best. You know, I said, walking slowly toward him, Luna thinks you just got lost. Damien's breath hitched as I stopped in front of him. She's a smart kid. We can help you find your way back, I whispered, whenever you get lost. If you want us to. The sound that left him was half a sob, half a sigh of profound relief. He reached for me, his large hands framing my face, his thumbs brushing away the tears that had escaped. More than anything. Then he kissed me. It was nothing like the frantic, passionate kiss I might have imagined. It was slow, tender, a sealing of a promise, a homecoming. His scent wrapped around me, smoke, whiskey, amber, sandalwood, and my own rose to meet it, cedar and cinnamon intertwining. For a moment, the world narrowed to just this, his lips on mine, his hands cradling my face, the steady beat of his heart against my chest. A crash came from the living room, followed by a cheerful, "I'm okay." We broke apart, laughing. The last of the tension dissolved into the warm, sunny morning. Come on, I said, taking his hand and pulling him toward the kitchen. You're on batter duty. And the ninja is in charge of syrup distribution. As Damien shrugged off his jacket and started measuring mix, as Luna climbed onto a chair to supervise, the familiar scent of pancakes and coffee began to weave through the apartment. It blended with the scent of wildflowers and leather, of hope and hard-won peace. It wasn't a perfect fairy tale ending. It was better. It was a Saturday morning. It was a choice renewed every day. It was the three of us in our small, messy kitchen, building a world of our own, one pancake at a time. 2 months later, the heat came early. I knew the signs, the restless energy, the heightened sensitivity, the way my scent turned cloying and sweet, heavy with need. My suppressants had been running low, and I'd been so caught up in work and Luna and the strange, wonderful new shape of our lives that I'd let them lapse. I should have called Damien. I should have warned him. But pride, that old familiar demon, whispered that I could handle it. I'd handled it alone for 5 years. I could handle it now. I was wrong. The fever hit on a Thursday afternoon, while Luna was at school and I was folding laundry. One moment I was fine, the next, a wave of heat crashed over me, turning my bones to liquid, my thoughts to fog. My body screamed with need, every nerve ending hypersensitive, every breath a labor. The scent of my own heat filled the room, thick, cloying, desperate. Cedar and cinnamon, but turned up to a fever pitch, laced with something primal and pleading. I stumbled to the bedroom, fumbling for the emergency suppressants I kept in the nightstand drawer, but my hands were shaking too badly to open the bottle. The world spun, and I collapsed onto the bed, curling into myself, trying to breathe through the fire in my veins. It didn't matter that I was an omega, it didn't matter that my body was betraying me. I could survive this. I always had. But I didn't have to. Not anymore. Somehow, in the haze, my hand found my phone. I didn't remember dialing. I didn't remember speaking. But I must have, because the next thing I knew, the door was crashing open and Damien was there, scent of smoke and whiskey and leather and amber, filling the room, filling my lungs, steadying the spinning world. Ethan. His voice was rough, strained. I could smell his control, the iron grip he was keeping on his own instincts. He was an alpha, my heat was a siren's call, and he was fighting every urge to answer it. His scent spiked with desire, thick and dark, but beneath it was something else, concern, fear, love. I've got you. I'm here. Damien, I reached for him, and he caught me, pulling me into his arms. His scent enveloped me, a balm on the fire in my veins. The contact was electric, sending shudders through my overheated body, but he held me steady, his touch firm and grounding. "I'm not going anywhere," he murmured against my hair. "I'm right here. I'm staying." And he did. For the next 3 days, he stayed. He brought me water, cooled my skin with damp cloths, held me through the worst of the fever, and never once took advantage of my vulnerability. His control was absolute, his patience infinite. He whispered reassurances, told me stories, anchored me to reality when the heat tried to sweep me away. Every time I thrashed or moaned or begged, he held me tighter, his scent a constant, steady presence that reminded me I was safe. On the third night, when the fever finally broke and I lay trembling and exhausted in his arms, something shifted. His scent, that steady smoke and whiskey, amber and sandalwood, was everywhere now. It clung to my skin, my hair, my clothes. I was drenched in it. Marked by it. "Mine," he breathed, the words slipping out unbidden, and I felt something inside me settle, a deep, primal contentment that I'd never known existed. My omega instincts purred, recognizing the claim, accepting it. "Yours," I whispered back, and meant it. He marked me that night. Not with a bite, we weren't ready for that, not yet, but with his scent, his presence, his claim. He pressed his nose to the gland at my neck, breathing me in, and I felt the bond begin to form, a golden thread of connection that linked us together, body and soul. And when I woke the next morning, clear-headed for the first time in days, I knew, I was his, and he was mine, and nothing in the world would ever change that. Luna took the news with characteristic pragmatism. "So Damien is staying?" she asked, eyeing the alpha who was currently making pancakes in our tiny kitchen. "Like, staying? "Like staying, I confirmed. Luna nodded slowly, then turned to Damien with a stern expression that was far too mature for her 6 years. "You have to promise to always come back," she said. "When you get lost, you have to find your way back to us. That's the rule." Damien turned from the stove, spatula in hand, his eyes soft. "I promise, ninja. No matter what, I will always find my way back." Luna considered this, then nodded again. "Okay. You can stay." A few months later, Damien asked me to move in. I was nervous. His penthouse was a world away from our cramped apartment, all glass and steel and breathtaking views of the city. I didn't belong there. I didn't know how to live in a place where everything was pristine and expensive and utterly, completely his. But Damien, being Damien, had a solution. "The apartment was never a home," he said, leading me to a room I'd never seen before. "This will be." He opened the door. Inside was a space that looked like it had been lifted straight from our old apartment, all warm colors and mismatched furniture and crayon drawings taped to the walls. There was a growth chart on the wall, the tree one he'd given Luna, transplanted with care. There were bookshelves filled with my favorite novels, both old and new. In the corner, Luna's toy dinosaurs were arranged in a careful formation. "It's ours," Damien said quietly. "All of it. I wanted you to know that this is your home too. Not just mine, ours." I couldn't speak. I just threw my arms around him and held on. We got mated on a rainy Saturday, in the small, family-owned Italian restaurant where we'd had our first real date. The owner cried. Luna was the flower girl and the ring bearer and the self-appointed director of the entire ceremony. Damien wore a simple black suit that made him look like a god, and I wore a suit that Luna had picked out. "It's the perfect color for a king, Daddy." When Damien bit my neck, claiming me fully, the world narrowed to just the two of us, his scent flooding my senses, my omega instincts purring in contentment. I felt the bond snap into place, golden and warm and unbreakable. The bite was sharp, a moment of pain that dissolved instantly into pleasure, into rightness. I could feel him through the bond, his love, his devotion, his fierce protectiveness. And he could feel me. Everything I was, everything I'd been, everything I would become. Always, he whispered against my skin. Always, I promised back. 5 years later, Luna is 10 years old and every bit as bossy as she was at 5. She started asking when she'll get a little brother, which sends Damien into a tailspin of barely concealed excitement and me into a quiet panic. But that's a conversation for another Saturday. Right now, it's pancake morning. Damien is at the stove, flipping perfectly golden discs into the air while Luna directs operations from her chair, a syrup bottle in each hand. The penthouse smells like home, like butter and warmth and us. I lean against the counter, watching them. The man I love, the daughter I raised, the family we built. It wasn't a fairy tale. It was better. It was real, and messy, and absolutely, perfectly ours. Daddy! Luna shouts. Damien is doing the big flip. Watch! The pancake soars, spins, and lands perfectly back in the pan. Luna cheers. Damien grins at me over his shoulder, his eyes soft with love. I smile back, heart full. One pancake at a time. One Saturday at a time. One lifetime at a time. This is our story. And it's just beginning.